Welcome back to another deep dive.
Yeah.
You already covered the Oostras and all the controversy.
Yeah.
But there's another player in this whole saga whose role we really need to unpack,
Right.
and that's Henry Kamps.
Yeah. Henry's actions and opinions are especially interesting, I think, because he was on that committee appointed to respond to Dylan Altina's accusations against Brandon and Alana
Oh, yeah.
and kind of set everything in motion. So,
And now he's been deposed.
right.
So how did that happen?
Well, it all started when Henry Kamps, along with Joel Langerak, were appointed to this committee
Right.
to figure out how to handle Dylan Altina's accusations against the Oostras.
Okay.
Their recommendation to the consistory was basically
Right.
that First RPC should not get involved with Dylan's charges against the Oostras.
Okay.
And that recommendation actually initially failed on the consistory floor
Oh, wow.
before it was ultimately approved in an amended form.
That's interesting. It sounds like the consistory really did try to distance themselves from this whole thing at first.
Yeah, I think they were really hesitant to engage with Dylan's accusations.
Oh,
They even expressed concerns about the committee delving into the specifics of the financial dispute between Dylan and the Oostras and, questioning Dylan's standing within the church.
So they just kind of wanted to wash their hands of it.
It seems that way, yeah.
But obviously that approach didn't last.
No, it didn't. In fact, while all of this was happening, Brandon and Alana were actively seeking membership at First RPC.
Yeah.
And the consistory initially seemed pretty welcoming,
Yeah, it seemed like a smooth transition at first.
until it wasn't.
Right. What happened?
Well, that's when Reverend Langerak and others started voicing their concerns
Okay.
about the Oostra's past actions in Iowa.
Hmm.
And this really seems to mark a turning point in the congregation's attitude,
Yeah.
a shift from, initial welcoming to suspicion.
It's really interesting to see how all of this unfolds and Henry's role in it.
Right.
Because at this point, he starts consulting with a lawyer
Yep.
to form his own opinions about how things should be handled.
Exactly. And that's when his position really starts to evolve.
Right.
At first, he seems to be supportive of the Oostras, but as the situation develops, his stance shifts. And eventually, he becomes a vocal opponent, going so far as to write what he called a study report,
Oh, really?
addressing Reverend Langerak's accusations of embezzlement and blackmail against the Oostras.
Okay, hold on. This report sounds important.
It is.
This is where the lawyer comes in, right?
Yeah, this is where Henry's consultations with legal counsel really start to shape his thinking.
And his actions.
Exactly. The study report isn't just a theological analysis.
Yeah.
It actually brings in legal arguments.
Oh.
Henry argues that Reverend Langerak's accusations are inappropriate
Okay.
because there hasn't been any civil legal judgment against the Oostras.
So basically, he's saying you can't accuse them of these things without a court ruling.
Right?
That's a very specific line to draw.
It is, and it raises some really interesting questions about, the relationship between civil law and church discipline.
For sure. So is Henry trying to shield the Oostras from scrutiny? Or is he just trying to ensure that accusations are handled appropriately within the church?
That's the big question, isn't it?
And it gets even more complicated because this report doesn't stop there.
No, it doesn't.
It actually accuses Reverend Langerak of lording over the congregation.
It does. Henry argues that Langerak is overstepping his boundaries by making such serious accusations without a legal basis.
So he's acting like judge and jury.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this really throws a wrench into the whole situation.
Because now we have the consistory trying to avoid getting involved at all, and then Henry stepping in.
With legal advice, no less.
Yeah, challenging how the accusations are being handled. It feels like the conflict's really starting to heat up.
Oh, absolutely. This is just the beginning.
Oh boy.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back
After the break.
with more of the deep dive
On Henry Kamps.
and the events leading up to his suspension and deposition from First RPC.
See you soon. Things definitely got more complicated after that report.
Yeah, you mentioned this was just the beginning.
Right. And, Henry's study report, with all its legal arguments,
Right.
really seemed to add fuel to the fire.
So they weren't just talking about theology anymore. They were worried about lawsuits and stuff.
Exactly. The consistory started to think a lot more about the legal ramifications of their actions.
Okay.
Especially with all the controversy swirling around the Oostras.
Right, and the congregation was becoming more divided.
Absolutely. There were strong opinions on both sides.
Yeah, it must have been so hard for everyone involved.
It was. And for Henry in particular, trying to navigate this increasingly divided environment
Yeah.
ultimately led to a very public confrontation.
You're talking about when he refused to shake Rev Lomhoff's hand.
right after a sermon.
Okay, yeah, that was a huge deal. What led him to do that?
Well, he said it was a matter of conscience.
Oh, wow.
He felt he couldn't participate in a gesture of unity
Yeah.
after a sermon he so strongly disagreed with.
It's powerful, though, right? Like how strongly he felt about it.
It is, but there were consequences.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The consistory didn't take that lightly.
No, they didn't. They viewed it as a public display of schism,
Okay.
like a direct challenge to their authority and the unity of the church.
And that's what led to his suspension.
Yes. From being an elder, they saw his actions as divisive and undermining the church's stability.
So they had to take action.
Right, to maintain order, address this threat to the congregation's unity.
So now Henry is at odds with both Rev. Langerack and the consistory.
Yeah, he alienated himself from both sides.
And it didn't end there, right? His suspension wasn't the end of the story.
No, his steadfast adherence to his own interpretation of the situation.
Right, backed by legal advice.
Yeah, put him in direct conflict with the leadership, and it ultimately led to his deposition.
Wait, deposed, so not just suspended, but removed from his position as elder.
That's right. The consistory held a joint council meeting with another church, Cornerstone RPC, to discuss the situation, and actually, Cornerstone pushed for a harsher punishment
Oh, wow.
than the suspension recommended by First RPC.
So another church felt strongly enough about his actions to intervene.
Yeah, they saw his public dissent as a threat to church order.
Wow. So what happened after Henry's deposition? How did things play out?
Well, the congregation of First RPC issued a public statement acknowledging their own failings and how they handled the Oostra's membership.
Oh, really?
They admitted to rushing the process and not fully considering all the concerns raised.
Do you think that's connected to Henry's actions? Like his protest forced them to take a harder look at themselves?
It's possible, even though his approach was controversial,
Yeah.
his persistent challenges may have led to some deeper reflection.
Okay, and what about Second RPC? What did they say?
They issued a final statement saying the matter was closed,
Okay.
and that reconciliation wasn't possible as long as the Oostras remained unrepentant.
Wow, it seems like everyone involved reached a point of no return.
They did the divisions created by this whole conflict.
Yeah.
Just proved insurmountable.
And what about Henry? What happened to him?
Unfortunately, the sources don't offer much information about his life after all of this.
It's kind of sad. I mean, you can only imagine the impact this must have had on him.
Absolutely, both personally and spiritually.
This whole story really makes you think about how hard it can be to navigate disagreements,
Yeah.
especially when your convictions are so strong.
And how do we balance the need for unity with the right to individual conscience?
That's a really tough question.
Hmm.
Where do you draw the line between personal conviction and respect for authority?
Exactly, questions that resonate far beyond this situation.
Definitely, we all face these questions in our own lives, in our churches, families, workplaces.
And this deep dive doesn't offer any easy answers,
No.
but it does give us a lot to think about.
Yeah, it really does make you think. Henry's journey through all of this is just fascinating.
Right.
I mean, what stands out to you the most about his approach?
Well, I think his commitment to his understanding of church law.
Yeah.
You know, even when it put him at odds with the consistory and the people accusing the Oostras,
Right.
he really believed he was doing the right thing.
Yeah, he was following his conscience.
Exactly.
It's almost like that conviction led to his downfall.
It's true. It's a tragic example of how strongly held beliefs can lead to, division and isolation.
And it's tough because this all happened within a community that's supposed to be united by faith.
Right, and it raises the question of how do you navigate those situations where your conscience conflicts with the decisions of those in authority.
It's like, how do you balance what you believe is right with the need for unity and order?
And where do you draw the line between personal conviction and respect for authority?
Right. These are questions we all have to wrestle with at some point, I think.
Definitely, whether it's in our churches or families or even in the workplace.
Yeah, it's a constant challenge to find that balance,
It is.
between standing up for what you believe in
Right.
and respecting the authority that's been established.
And I think this deep dive into Henry's story really gives us a chance to reflect on those questions.
Yeah, it doesn't give us easy answers.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But it definitely makes us think about our own beliefs, about authority and conscience.
Absolutely. And that delicate balance between individual conviction and community harmony.
So as we wrap up, what do you think the listener should take away from all of this?
That's a good question.
I mean, how might this have unfolded differently?
Hmm.
If Henry had responded differently,
Mm.
like maybe taken a less confrontational approach.
It's hard to say for sure,
Yeah.
but it's worth considering.
Could he have influenced the outcome without alienating himself?
Maybe a more conciliatory approach could have prevented his suspension and deposition.
But then again, maybe it would have compromised his conscience.
Yeah, it's a really complex situation.
There are no easy answers.
Definitely not.
Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the story of Henry Kamps.
It's been great.
It's a reminder that even within the church, conflict is possible.
Yeah, human fallibility is everywhere.
It is. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We hope this deep dive has made you think
Right.
about how we can all work towards understanding and unity even when we disagree.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening.